Happy Thursday, 7th graders. Just a reminder, you should be on your best behavior while Miss Job is not here today. So we are going to work on our Unit 7.3.2 Linear Equations Review. Before we start our review, a couple of reminders. Today is Thursday, so reminder number 1 is that your homework is due tomorrow. If it is already completed, be sure that you turn your homework in to your class period drawer. If you need a second copy of your homework, it is assignment number 6 in the crate on the back table. So be sure you are responsible for completing your work. This is the last week of the homework war. So I have a battle heating up. Right now, 4th period is in the lead, so some students have some catching up to do if they want to catch 4th period. So let's set our expectations for today while I am not here. So your voice level today during the video will be a voice level 0. There should be no talking. You should be quietly working on your review while the video is playing. If you need help for any reason, please make sure that you raise your hand. Okay? If you didn't get something and you need the sub to pause the video, please let them know as well. Your activity today is to complete your test review video notes. I will be walking through each problem in your test review. You are to take your test review home with you so that you have something to study to get ready for the test. If you have any questions, if there's something you just didn't understand, make sure you have those questions ready for me to go in the morning. Your movement only needs to be with permission. Remember, we don't have a pencil sharpener, got broken. There will be a hand pencil sharpener left that you will need to sharpen over the trash can if you need it. I do not have pencils available for you to use in class today, so if you need something to write with, you may get a map pencil from the black cart in the front. Okay, your job is to complete all 10 questions in your review for the day to get ready for that test. Okay, so now that expectations have been set and you know your responsibility, we are going to start looking at the 10 problems in the review. So problem number 1 says, which point on the graph represents the y-intercept? Okay, right, so remember, y-intercept, that is the point on the graph where the line crosses the y-axis. So when we are looking for the y-axis, remember that point that we are looking for, y-axis runs up and down. So here is our y-axis. So if we look, there is only one point on our line that crosses the y-axis, and that is point W. The y-intercept would be at 0, 2. So W, which is answer choice B, is the point which represents the y-intercept for problem number 1. Okay, so pause here. Put any work that you need to put before moving on. All right. Number 2 says, what is the slope, m, and the y-intercept of the line that is graphed below? So remember, slope, we are going to be using rise over run since I have a graph. And again, our y-intercept is the point at which our line crosses the y-axis. So here is our point right there on the graph that our line crosses the y-axis. So we'll start with the y-intercept first. Remember, for y-intercept, you have your coordinates x and y. Those are the ordered pair. So our x-coordinate for y-intercept is always going to be 0, and our y-coordinate is on our graph. So our y-coordinate for this problem is 3. So our y-intercept in this problem is 0, 3. Okay, so I can look at answer choice A. That matches 0, 3. Answer choice B, that does not match. So B cannot be the answer to this problem. Answer D does not match for the y-intercept. So D cannot be the answer to this problem. So if I check C, it meets our requirement of 0, 3 for the y-intercept. So now I have to look at slope. And remember, since we are looking at slope in a graph, we are going to be looking for rise over run. Okay? If we look, we're going to look at our graph, and we're going to first decide, is it positive or negative for the slope of our line? So if I look at my graph, it goes up from left to right. So this graph has positive slope. So if we look, I know that I have got to have a positive number to represent M. So if I look at M in A and C, there is only one that is positive. So answer choice A has to be the correct answer. But if we're looking at our graph, we can pick any 2 points on our line to see our rise over run. So I'm going to pick these 2 points. So remember, we create our triangle, and I say, how many did I go up? So to get from 1 to 2, I went up 1. And how many did I go over from -2 to -1? Well, I went over 1. So my rise over run is 1 over 1, which is just positive 1. So again, we have proven that answer choice A is the correct answer. So let's pause here so we can get the work for number 2. All right, moving on to number 3. Says which linear equation has the slope of 3 and a y-intercept of -2. So first we need to remember that our linear equation is in the form y equals m, hold on just a second, there we go. Our slope-intercept equation is y equals mx plus b. So remember, our slope is m and our y-intercept is b. So once I know those 2 pieces of information, all I have to do is plug in my equation. So I'm going to have y equals, my slope is 3, so I have 3x. My y-intercept is -2, so I'm going to have -2. So now all I have to do is see, does A, B, C, or D match that equation? So if I look at answer choice A, y equals 3x plus 2. That does not match our equation. B, y equals 3x minus 2. I think we have a winner, ladies and gentlemen. So answer choice B matches our equation with the slope of 3 and a y-intercept of -2. Okay, so let's pause right here so we can get down our work. All right, moving on to number 4. It says Carrie correctly graphs the linear function. The slope of the function is -1, and our y-intercept is 3. So since our slope is -1, there's a couple of things we need to remember. Since our slope is negative, that means our line is going to be running down. So negative slope means our line runs down from left to right. Okay, so it's going to be decreasing. Okay, so we can look at our graphs to start with, and we can say, does our line run down from left to right? So I can eliminate graph B. Our slope runs up. So we have a positive slope in graph B. A has a negative slope. Our slope is down. Okay, our line runs down. If I look at answer choice C, again, I have positive slope. It runs up from left to right. So answer choice C is not correct. If I look at answer choice D, I look at my slope, and it runs down from left to right. So that one, again, has negative slope. So we are left with 2 answer choices. So the next thing I'm going to look for is I'm going to look at the y-intercept being 3. So that is a positive 3. So I'm going to look for where my line crosses the y-axis, and it should be where it crosses at positive 3. So if I look at graph A, I can see Here's where my y-intercept is. It is indeed at positive 3. If I look at my graph D, my y-intercept is negative 1. So that does not meet our requirements. So I can eliminate answer choice D. We're going to verify by finding the slope of negative 1. So our slope of negative 1 means we go down 1 and over 1 for any points. So I can pick my y-intercept and another point on my graph. So to get to the next point, I do indeed go down 1 and over 1 for my rise over run. So A is the correct answer for number 4. So please pause here and get any notes that you need. All right, let's have a look at number 5. It says the table shows the number of tickets sold and the profit made at the fundraiser. So we have our table. It says, which describes the relationship between the number of tickets sold and the profit. So we are kind of looking for our pattern. Okay, so A says each ticket sold yields a profit of $8. B says each ticket sold yields $9 as profit. C, each ticket sold yields $16 as profit. D, each ticket sold yields $18 of profit. So we're going to go to our table and we're going to see what's happening in our pattern. So I can see to get from 2 to 4, I'm going to add 2. To get from 4 to 6, again, I add 2. To get from 6 to 8, I'm going to add 2. So remember, tickets sold represent our X. So now let's look what's going on in our profits. Profits represent our Y. So I have 18 to 36. So we went up by 18. Then I went 36 to 54. Again, I've gone up by 18. 54 to 72. Again, I have increased by 18. So when we are trying to figure this out, we are trying to find our rate of change. So remember, our constant rate of change was change in Y over, so when we were looking for that constant rate of change, it is change in Y over change in X. So we have that information in our table. So let's look at our points. We can see from our table that our Y's are changing by 18. So I have 18 as my change in my Y. My X's are changing by 2 each time. So my change in Y is 18. My change in X is 2. So we do need to simplify that by using division. So I can divide the top and the bottom by 2. So 18 divided by 2 is 9. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So my constant rate of change is 9 over 1. So you're probably thinking, what does that mean? So remember, our Y coordinates represent profit. How much money are we making? So I have a profit of $9. My X coordinate down at the bottom so Y is profit, X represents our tickets sold. So if we read our constant rate of change, it represents that one ticket will give us a profit of $9. So if we look at our answer choices, answer choice B tells us that each ticket gives us $9 of profit. So the correct answer for this problem is answer choice B. So please pause, get any work for this problem before moving on. All right, let's have a look at number 6. It says which table of values corresponds to the graph below. Okay, so which one matches? So we have to match our X coordinates with our Y coordinates. Sorry for that interruption. All right, so we have 3 tables to choose from. So it's very important for us to remember how to graph points. So we're going to start with 1 point on our graph. So if we look at A, -3, -1. So that means we go over on our x to -3, and then I go down 1. So our first point in chart A is on our graph. So let's check our second point in chart A. 0, 0. So that means it's the origin. It's the point right there. So our second point is indeed in our graph. So let's check B and see. We've already checked 2 points in the first A, so maybe it's A. In B, it says -1, 3. So I go over a -1 and down 3. So I can see that there is not that point on my line. So just from the first point, we can say B is eliminated. Let's check C. Our first point in C says -1, -1. So that means I start here, go over to -1, and down to -1. So that point is not on our line. So the first point does not match. So we can eliminate C. We are going to go verify that the remaining points are indeed on our graph, just to give us a little bit more practice with refreshing our memory of how to graph coordinates. So 3, 1 means we go over 3 on our x-axis, and we go up 1. And we can see that that indeed is a point on our graph. Check. Okay, if we look at the last point we have to check, 6, 2. So we start at 0, 0, go over 6, then up 2, and yes, indeed, that point is also on our graph. So that indeed verifies that point A, or the information in answer choice A, represents the data in the graph. Our table and our graph match. Okay, pause here if you need to get information. All right, moving on to number 7. Which table does not represent a linear relationship? So there is a key word. That key word is not. So you'll notice right now that that key word is capitalized, all capital letters. That does not mean that they always are going to capitalize that when you are looking at it for a test question. So when we're looking for a linear relationship, we are looking for the change in y over change in x. If my x's and my y's are changing by the same amount each time, then I know that I have a linear relationship. So it is our job to check each one of the tables and see if we have a constant rate of change. So we're going to start with our first table. If we look, we're looking at how do we get from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and I can see that each one of these is changing by 1 each time. So I have a change of +1. So my change in my x is 1. So now let's check my y's. How am I getting from one y to the next? So if I look, my y's in this time, in this chart, go 6, 9, 12, 15. So each one of these is increasing by 3. It is staying constant. So my change in y is 3. So my constant rate of change, my y over my x in that change, is equal to, in this problem from this table, 3 over 1. Remember, constant rate of change is also the slope. Okay, let's check out number 2. So I'm looking again, how are my x's changing? How are my y's changing in my table? So my x goes 1, 2, 3, 4. So all of my x's, again, are increasing by 1. They don't always increase by 1, but often they do. So I know my change in y over my change in x right now is 1 for my x. So now we're going to look at our y's. How are we doing with our y changes? So I'm going to start. To get from 2 to 4, I add 2. To get from 4 to 7, I add 3. To get from 7 to 11, I add 4. So if I look at answer choice B, you will notice that I am not having a constant change for y in my table. It is not constant. So since it is not constant, it is not representing a linear relationship. So this is the answer that we are looking for. Answer choice B is not linear. We can also look at C to see what their change is for y over x, and we're going to quickly look at D as well. All right, so if we look at C and D, okay, I have completed the tables for both of these. So our x's are changing by 1, and my y's are changing by -2. So my change in y over x is -2 over 1 for our table C. So that indeed represents a constant rate of change. If we look at D, my x's change by 1, my y's change by +2. So my change in x over change in y is 2 over 1 for D. It is a constant rate of change. So please be careful on a question like this, because they might ask you for the not. They may also ask you for what is the constant rate of change. So look for the pattern in the table. If your x's change by the same amount and your y's are changing by the same constant amount, then you have a linear relationship shown in your table. Pause. Make sure you get your work for each table. All right, moving on to number 8. Says the points given in the table lie on a line. So that tells us they make a line in a graph. Okay? And it's asking us for the slope. So remember, when we find slope, we are looking for m. If it's in a graph, we are looking for a rise over run. But this time we have a table. So I'm not looking for rise over run. I am going to be looking for my constant rate of change. I'm going to be looking for how are my x's changing and how are my y's changing in my table. That will tell me what the slope is. So first I'm going to start with my x's. It goes 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. So I can see that each one of my x's is increasing by 1. So my change in x is going to be 1. So now let's have a look at my change in y. So I go 5 to 7, 7 to 9, 9 to 11. Each one of my y's is increasing by 2 in my table. So my y's, they're increasing by 2. So my y's change by 2. So my slope, which is represented in a table as change in y over change in x, is 2 over 1. So remember, anytime we have a number over 1, it is just that answer. So my slope is answer choice D, which is 2. Okay, so pause, get the work down for this problem before moving on. All right, so if we have a look at number 9, it says which equation represents the graph of our line. So we can put our points in for x and y and see if it works for which equation. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my y-intercept, that point at which the line crosses that y-axis. So if I look, I can see that my y-intercept is at -3. So that means, remember, our equation for any line is y equals mx plus b. Remember that b is the y-intercept. So our y-intercept is -3. So if we looked at our answer choices, our y-intercept at A is positive 3. So that cannot be the equation for our line. If we look at B, our y-intercept, again, is positive 3. B cannot be the equation for our line. So if we look at C, it does say minus 3, and D also says minus 3. So now we are left with only 2 choices to choose from. So our job now is to pick points and see if they match on our graph. So I will notice that right here, I'm going to pick this point. So my x is 3, my y should be 0. That should be my point that would be in our table. So that means if I plug in an x of 3 to one of these two equations, I should get out the y of 0. So let's check the first one. So 3 times 3, by plugging in my x of 3, gives me 9. And if I take 9 minus 3 for my equation, that equals 6. So that does not match with my y of 0. So that eliminates answer choice C. So now let's have a look at D. All right, so if I plug in my x of 3, I have 3 minus 3, which does indeed give me 0. So this matches what I'm supposed to get in my graph. So that is the correct answer. We could also pick another point on our graph. If we chose 4, so I should have 4 for my x, and I should get a 1 for my y. That is the point on the line. So 4 for the x should give us a y of 1. So let's check. So I have 4 minus 3 does indeed give me 1 for my y. So again, we have verified that D is the correct answer to this problem. Okay, pause here and get your work before moving on to our last question. All right, so it says which equation represents the data in the table. So we have a couple of things that we need to look for. So remember, when we're trying to find the slope, we are looking for change in y over change in x. All right, so for slope in a table, we use change in y over change in x. In a table, we're looking for the y-intercept. We have to remember that our x equals 0. So I noticed something right away in our table. So if you look, we see that we have an x value of 0 in our table, and I have a corresponding y value that goes with it. So my x is 0, my y is negative 1. So that means my y-intercept for this problem is going to be negative 1. So I can look at my answer choices. A says my y-intercept is positive 1. So remember, our formula is y equals mx plus b. M is the slope, and b is the y-intercept. So A does not match. If I look at answer choice B, it says my slope is positive 1, my y-intercept is positive 1, and I need negative 1. So answer choice B does not work either. Answer choice C says my y-intercept is negative 1, and answer choice D says my y-intercept is negative 1. So I have eliminated 2 answers. Now I have to check for the slope. So remember, change in y over change in x. So when I have a look, I can see that my x's are changing by 1. Negative 1 plus 1 is 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. And 1 plus 1 is 2. So my x's change by 1. So now let's check out our y's. I'll notice that my first numbers are negative. We don't like to work with negative numbers. So let's check the last one. 1 to 3 is an increase of 2. So negative 1 plus 2 gives me positive 1. Negative 3 plus 2 gives me negative 1. So my y's are changing by a positive 2. So my slope, remember, is just that number on top, 2. So my equation would be y equals 2x minus 1 when I plug in my numbers. So if I look, I can find that that matches with answer choice D. Okay, so that completes our review video. Make sure you pause, you get your work, take your study guide home to review for your test. If you have questions tomorrow, tutoring is available at 7:35. Please come in and see me. If you do not have a pass, then ask your parents for a pass to come in the morning.